This brings us to where the Democrats are now, because I think a couple of things are happening. I mean, look, on one hand, obviously, I think what we're seeing from an emboldened President Obama is that he's finally governing as, he's not that progressive. He's not that left wing, but I think he's a genuine, center left leader. And that means good things for things like immigration, for climate. It means good things on certain economic issues like pushing for higher minimum wage, paternity leave, maternity leave. This is great stuff. But it seems like finally some of the people like Chris Van Hollen, who's a very mainstream Democrat, they're finally getting that it's not just that Elizabeth Warren is right substantively, but this is the obvious place to be politically, which is pushing for taxes on Wall Street, pushing for really addressing all the issues you just outlined.
Yeah, I think it's, because I think that one goes with the other. As they say, good policy makes good politics, and I think it's true. And there are people, again, Elizabeth Warren has been so forthright about this, and these are the same things a lot of us have been yelling about when we looked at the results of the last election and looked at people that had barely won the election before in at least what we would consider swing states, like examples being Al Franken in Minnesota and Jeff Merkley in Oregon. Yep. And they just cleaned the other side's clocks. Right from the beginning, those races were no longer even competitive because they come out and they speak in a manner where people know what they're going to do for them. And this happened where it was, I think it was Hart Research did a poll around the country, and they said that people were not excited, certainly very unexcited about any of the Republicans, tired of people Bush, and frankly, they weren't overly excited with Hillary Clinton. They certainly liked her better than all the Republicans, which is good news. Right. But the one name that kept coming up he said it didn't matter, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, was Elizabeth Warren.
Absolutely.
Because they felt like even people who disagreed with her socially felt like she was on their side. I've seen that here in Ohio with Sherrod Brown.
Right.
All right, again and again. We saw that with Tom Harkin in Iowa. We've seen this with progressives in either swing states, or purple states, or even somewhat more red states that are willing to run on these types of issues. The problem is that the Democratic Party has walked away from this and given small bore sort of answers. Well, we just raised the minimum wage. Well, that's great and that's important, but that's not an overall plan, right? What Chris Van Hollen's had is a multi-part plan to help people. And we're talking about raising a financial transaction tax. Right. We're talking about ways that the top 1% would be taxed, and ways that would provide opportunities and tax cuts for the middle class. You couple that on top of this sort of born again, suddenly progressive President Obama, or at least outwardly progressive, talking about things like community college and talking about Cuba, and these kind of immigration. And these kinds of things that have also been helpful, although he may ruin all of that with his free trade plan.
Right.
But so people hear this stuff, they get it, and it makes a difference. And it makes a difference in the way people vote.
And I think, Cliff, just to add on to that, and I want, your final thoughts as we wrap up, but I think that's a really, really big point, because people have made the point in the past, and I think has some validity to it. I'm not always persuaded by it, but it has some validity that, in a race between two conservatives, people are going to pick the real conservative. And, and that's sort of like the jibe at, Democrats running these sort of like pseudo-conservative races to try to match Republicans on, I love the guns and Bible just as much as you. And that's a fair point. But I think the deeper point is what you just alluded to, which is like, if you trot out the Koch brothers, or if you talk about minimum wage, that's great, but it's incoherent. It doesn't fit in a story. It doesn't fit in a package. Right. It doesn't hang together. Republicans hang together.
There's nothing that gives it context.
It doesn't exactly. These guys are bad. You should have a few more bucks in your paycheck. Great, but where's the overarching thing? What makes it fit? Where's the structure? And if they finally start to do that, obviously they need to be held accountable to actually do it. But in the short term, they certainly will be a lot more electorally successful.
I would just say there's a very obvious reason why President Obama's approval rating is back almost up to 50%. Why Elizabeth Warren is being talked about by the people she is, even Republicans, in this poll. Why all these things are happening, and it's because these people are talking like progressives. And the truth of the matter is, once you get past labels that have been demonized by Republicans, like the dreaded L word that you're liberal, which has been making a comeback too, by the way. But that's what they're good at. They're good at providing a label: Obamacare, gun control, whatever it might be, and demonizing that without people when people look beyond that to the specifics below that, and when they look at the specific things, what they believe in about government's role in our society, about the rights of people to love who they want and associate with who they want, and the rest of that, in almost every one of those questions, they come down majority, and many of them super majority progressive.
Definitely.
And that's just the way it is. And it's nice to see some people finally embracing it. And Elizabeth Warren proving why one voice, if it's loud enough and charismatic enough and constant enough, can make an enormous difference. I'm not saying it's all her, but she certainly has played a big role.